Yeah, we don't need to concern ourselves with that license agreement, nor is this wrong, because I just reset this. In fact, the seconds are pretty damn close. That's kind of surprising. I was not expecting to do that so well. Okay, everybody. Welcome aboard. It has been a bit of a busy week over here, but I'm finally getting around to the character creation video that I was going to do for this as a prelude to when I inevitably stream a run-through on the hard difficulty of this game in its offline form. Welcome to Phantasy Star Online, episodes 1 and 2 plus. For those of you who are curious, the main difference between this and regular episodes 1 and 2 is pretty small. I don't even remember what it is, other than probably some improved code things to prevent some exploits and some stuff like that. I think they added in some pieces of new gear, and that's about it. But let's go into offline game. Single mode, yes, we are not interested in multiplayer because I have nobody else around here to do that with. We go to one of our no data slots. Actually, let's Bryself it here and let's get a slot 2 character here. And we get ourselves a cutscene. I haven't seen this in a million years. Well, shit, I think we killed the Pioneer 1, didn't we? Excuse me. That'll wake you up, I bet. I saw that sound peak on my microphone setting. So yeah, that thing that appeared before that explosion was pretty freaky looking, and we didn't even get a look at its textures properly. Now the time has come for us to create a character, and I'm going to describe all of the classes, even though I already have a character class in mind already. So why don't you have a little bit of fun and play a little guessing game with what character class I'm going to go with here. So, out of the character classes, the 12 character classes, they are broken up into 3 basic subsets. We've got our hunters, who are primarily for melee fighting, although they have some pretty good range combat abilities because their main attribute is doing high damage with a strong attack stat. Then down here we have rangers, who are primarily associated with shooting things, but they have a great accuracy, which also makes them really good supports for dealing status effects if you're in a party. Of course, I'm not, so... Ugh. And down here, we have our mage class, the Forces. There's a little bit of variety between each of them in terms of what skills they get that are buffed. Well, I mean, they all get the same spells, but certain ones gain special buffs for being in that class. And yes. So, with the basics outlined, let's go and get a little granular here. Let's take a look at our hunters. We got the Humar. This is our human male hunter. He's got fairly well-rounded stats. He can learn most of the spells in the game up to level 15, out of a max of 30, by the way. Except that he cannot learn Grants and Magid, which are the light and dark spell, respectively. And he also cannot learn Shifta and Deband, which are the stat buffs. Shifta is attack up, Deband is defense up. He also cannot learn Reverser, I believe, which is the revive spell. And I think his Anti, which Anti is a spell that works on a very different set of levels. I think he can only go up to level 5, if I recall correctly, which is still most of the status effects that you would want to be able to purge from yourself or from allies. It just means that he can't remove stat reductions and can't remove freeze, but freeze is fairly easy to deal with most of the time anyway, so meh. And down here we have the Uniworld. She is not a human, she is described as a human. These are, well, they're basically elves. They're space elves. It's more complicated than that plot-wise, but I don't think that's well described in this game. It is in the original Phantasy Star games for the Sega Genesis and Sega Master System for Phantasy Star 1. For those of you who are curious, by the way, the amount of connection that this has to those previous 4 games is very, very little. There are, like, references and callbacks, and they're technically in the same universe, multiverse type of thing, but you don't have to have played any of those games to get the plot. We are not in the Algol system. We are approaching the planet Rogol with a different set of sentient humanoid spoken races, if you will. So, the Uniworld can learn magic up to level 20 for all the spells that the Humar could, except she could also learn Shifta and Deband. So, basically, level 20 for everything except for Grants Magid and Reverser. And I think her Anti goes to level 6. Don't quote me on that. But maybe it's level 7. I do not remember offhand. Now we come down to a character with a little bit more variation. Oh yeah, so she's kind of like the Humar, but a little bit more oriented toward magic, as you could probably guess. And has lower HP, and I believe just lower strength and everything else, too. She has a fairly unique attribute in that she has regenerating TP being technique points, aka your mana pool. This is shared with 2 of the Force classes. We'll talk about that when we get there. It means that she can use fewer stat materials, though. Now, down to the Hue cast, they share the... Basically, both of the non-human races share the reduced stat material cap. However, the casts, who are called casts in future games, and I believe in previous games also, but here they are referred to as androids, have... In this game, they have the ability to regenerate HP very slowly over time once they're out of combat, which enables them to be fairly hardy and really good for solo content. The HueCast is just a damage machine. He's got the strongest attack power out of any class, and as you can see at the bottom, they're unable to use techniques but can use traps, and we will discuss that in a second sort of intro video. I'm going to do 2 of them just to break things up a little bit. So this guy is probably the most popular character in online play just because once you sort of cap out, you're so broken that playing as a team is not necessarily your topmost priority, and you can just do so much damage with this dude, especially if you're on one of the private servers and you can access Dark Flow as a result. which is a weapon that we are not going to be able to obtain even if we went into ultimate mode, because its drop rate for the part for it is 0 offline for some reason. Not sure why that happened. Down here we have the Hucasil. Here is our female android. She has something very interesting and unique about her, in that her attacks have different animations, which actually makes some of them quite a bit faster to use, especially if she's using the twin dagger class weapons. She can hit really fast, and that can be a huge benefit. Not a class I play very much, though. Her best stat is she has like the highest evasion out of all classes, I believe. But evasion is kind of a dump stat because it takes so long for you to see any real benefit from having high evasion. So, meh. Big deal. Now down here, the Ramar. Once again, this is our expert sniper sort of class. He's got a very well-balanced stat sets. It says there has the most balanced set of abilities, and I'd probably be inclined to agree, with the highest accuracy potential, which is great because attack accuracy is a stat that rises very slowly. So being able to get a bunch of that, and especially the ability to equip better firearms earlier on, very nice. It lets him overperform at low levels. In terms of magic, well, first of all, his magic stat I think is the worst outside of casts, so don't bother. But he gets spells up to level 15, cannot learn Jellin and Zalur, which are the two stat debuff spells. Instead, he gets Shifted and Deband. Can't learn Grants or Megid, as usual, and can't learn Reverser. And he gets Anti up to level 5. That one I know offhand because I've played this dude quite a bit. Down here, the Ramarl. This is our first human female. Once again, kind of like the Uniworld, but with guns instead of high attack stat. So, a little bit more of the well-rounded sort of character. She's kind of eh. She gets stats up to level... She gets magic up to level 20 for spells except for Grants, Megid, and Reverser. And again, that anti-level is either 6 or 7. I don't remember which. Now down here we've got the Rawcast. This is our male android ranger. And as it says, he's got the greatest attack power out of all the rangers. And he's got pretty good accuracy to compensate. So the Rawcast, I would say, is a really good choice if you want a physical attacker. Like, honestly, probably one of the better classes in the game. Also, when he walks around, he makes obnoxious stompy noises, and, I mean, just an absolute unit. A real chonky boy there. It looks like kind of an old-school mech a little bit. Now, down here, we've got the Rockasil. They even note the most notable thing about this class in that she has the greatest defensive potential out of the ranger classes. I believe on top of that, she has the most defense out of any class. And that can be a bit of a problem because the way defense and damage and stuff works in this game is that if you take a certain threshold of damage, I think it's a quarter of your max HP, you'll get knocked over and you'll gain iframes as a result for a little while. So if you're getting dogged on by a large group of enemies and you take a big hit, then that actually leaves you safe for a moment and lets you recover and try to escape. If your defense goes to such a point that you're taking less damage than that, you don't get iframes when you get hit in any real sense, so you can just get surrounded by a bunch of, like, garbage mobs. And if your defense is not high enough that you take 0 damage, which in the very latest parts of the highest difficulties, even at max level, it probably won't be, you can just get obliterated by these things because you can't block any of their attacks. Now, last but not least, let's check out the Force class. In terms of what these classes can learn magic-wise, all of them get all spells up to their max level, up to level 30. For everything, they can all learn Grants, Megid, and Reverser. and they all get anti up to level 7. You obviously have to find those places, and level 30 techniques are very hard to come by, but hey, you can get them. So we're going to take a look at each of these. And so we've got the Fomar. It says a quickness in combat. That's not really true. However, Fomars are definitely very glass cannon-y. They have a very good physical ability in terms of being able to do damage, and they have very strong techniques. And in terms of so the techniques in the game, in terms of your basic elemental techniques, you have 3 major elements at each level. So you've got Foy, Barda, and Zonde. Foy is fire, Barda is ice, Zonde is lightning. And you've got these at like a basic level, then a mid level, which are Gifoy, Gizonde, and Gibarda. And then you have a strong level, which are Rafoy, Rabarda, Razonde. And there's a little bit of overlap in terms of the effect other than elements, which kind of makes a lot of the higher level spells actually kind of terrible, especially because, believe it or not, the high level spells don't really do that much more damage than the low level spells a lot of the time. Even before you factor in things like, oh, it'll be easier for you to find the low level spells. So, and then Grant and Megeed are counted in that high level, although they are sort of a separate thing, really. So Fomars get a boost to Gifoy, Gizonde, and Gibarda, which are generally pretty useful abilities. Gifoy makes a spiral of fireballs around you. Gizonde is a long-range chain lightning. Gibarda is sort of the odd one out. It's a fairly short-range cone of ice, but it can freeze things, and the damage on all these is pretty good. So this is a fairly decent damage dealer class, but it tends to just get left by the wayside, from my experience, just by virtue of not really being, like, the best class in the game at anything. So the Fomarl is more of your supporter, and she has pretty good melee ability. Like, if you give her a sword of some description, she'll actually be able to fight decently, which is great if you run out of TP for some reason. But also, it's just kind of, I find it fun for solo stuff. But she is definitely more support-oriented. I believe she gets a range buff to Resta, the heal spell, and to all of the stat boosting spells, so Shifta and D-Band. And also, I think she gets a damage boost to Grants, if I recall correctly. So not an amazing set of things for being able to hurt people, but still nice to have. However, she has the lowest magic strength out of the entire set of forces, and still fairly fragile as a result of being a force. So yeah, kind of a tough sell for a lot of people, I'd say. The Phonum, well-balanced, excel in numerous techniques, and they get boosts to Rafoy, Razonde, and Rabarda. Which sounds great that, okay, it's getting all the high-level elemental techniques, you're getting a boost to those, but you have to remember that those aren't that great. Razonde is basically lower damage, more expensive Gizonde. I almost said Gibarda. That'd be a little silly, but it's like chain lightning in a bit of a ring around you, and I think it has lower range too. Not completely worthless, but I feel like Razonde is kind of the worst tech in the game. Rafoy is pretty good. It targets a single enemy and creates an explosion around them and does really good damage. The fire spells tend to be higher damage because they don't have any chance to deal any sort of status effect. There we go. That's the term I'm looking for. I even said it earlier. Jesus. And Rabarda has really terrible range, and it's an ice spell, so it's reduced damage, but it can freeze. Kinda I've never really been a big fan of this class. However, much like the Uniworld, they have the regenerating TP thing, which can be pretty handy. Once you get out of an encounter, you just go ahead and, if you need to wait around and refill, that's fine. Just don't really do that online. That's kind of a jerk move. Lastly, the Fauna World. This is the class is kind of the most min-maxed in terms of being a mage. Highest mental strength TP potential of any class, as you can see down there. And in addition to that, they have like really terrible ability to fight with weapons, and they're pretty fragile, but also their base level techniques, so Foy, Barda, and Zonde are all boosted, which gives them great single target damage. Barda can hit multiple enemies, but the others cannot. They also, interestingly enough, I believe they have a further benefit of Magid being able to pierce multiple enemies. Magid in this game, it throws this ball of darkness that has a chance to instantly kill anything it hits, but otherwise it doesn't do any damage. It's a good thing that we aren't going to be playing this on Ultimate when we're on stream, otherwise you would hear me screaming about that for a certain area of the game, but I digress. Incidentally, that's the thing that ended up murdering me a lot in Phantasy Star Universe, but I forgot that it could actually one-hit kill you in that game. Because usually, I think in that game it can, like, blind you or something, too. But regardless of the point, that's a brief introduction to all of our 12 classes. And have you taken a guess as to what class I'm going to play as? That's right, I'm going to make the bad decision. We're going to be a robot girl. So our character customization is... There's a fairly decent amount for, remember, this came out in like 2000 or something, but our options are a little bit more limited than we would like. I suppose, how do we... Oh yeah, it's L and R to rotate. Okay. So we can get a better look at things, and as you can see, things are loading much faster now that we've actually loaded all of them. What can we do in terms of a color scheme? Because, I mean, that magenta is fine, but I'm sure we can get something a little better. There are some that I know that, like, the face is, like, a weird flesh color to it, which is kind of eerie. And, oh, yeah, and the rest of the skin, too. Yeah, like that. I'd like to avoid that. There's something about that that is off-putting to me. This is a little better, though. I'm probably going to end up going with a purple one, but, you know. At least we got some interesting ideas here. This one's just like a sand color with the regular metal color. Neat. Oh, that's very nice. I almost don't care to look at the other combinations, but we're going to take a look anyway. Again, just to show everything off a little bit, because, you know, I do enjoy showing things off where possible. I mean, that one's alright, but, oh, the flesh tones. Never mind. Terrible. We're going to that. We can adjust the proportions of the character in a fairly simple way. I'm going to do just a little bit of more height here. And go to our character name. We don't have a keyboard installed on this because we're on a GameCube, and that keyboard controller, yikes. So we're going to have to enter things the normal way. You can see that using the D-pad on the GameCube controller for me is not super great. This thing is tiny, and I've got very large thumbs. And even then, I'm pretty sure that mine is a little bit funky. And our section ID, that is a thing that is going to control what kind of drops we got. We got Whitetail, which is, it's okay. I mean, it's not my #1 choice, but for what class we're playing, I think we'll be able to put it to use. But that is going to be it for this little introduction video, and I will see you in another one fairly soon.